And Addington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The government has touted this budget as a budget that will tackle the high cost of living. Observers could be excused for thinking this meant the government would actually take substantive steps to addressing the underlying factors that have caused the historic rise in the price of food, heating, and gas, and other everyday essentials. Unfortunately, Canadians did not receive such a budget. And as a result, their confidence in the competency of this government's economic management continues to dither. Instead of taking care of the issues of the day, they burden future generations of Canadians with billions upon billions of unnecessary debt. It should not be up to Canada's sons and daughters to foot the bill for a government looking for a quick vote today. Canadians' families are suffering. Bottom line, this we know, we hear it every day. I can recite countless examples just locally of small business owners or farmers that have had to make extremely difficult decisions in order to stretch their dollars further. But there is one group of Canadians that are often overlooked in these discussions, a group of Canadians that have been treated as an afterthought by governments and looked at as an easy source of money when it needs to be found. Madam Speaker, our armed forces and their members. Over the past couple weeks, my office has been inundated by an alarming number of CAF members expressing grave concerns over numerous issues, but most recently, the replacement approved by Treasury Board of the post-living differential to the Canadian Forces housing differential. The pushback on this policy has been astounding. One person who granted permission for using their quote wrote in and they said, quote, "Many are losing money. The sliding scale it operates on has newly joined members making more money than those have been in for 12 to 15 years. This means as you work hard, strive to lead and progress, you will actually lose money. In what world does it make sense that as you promote into higher positions, you take a pay cut? You have members who will lose money because once they move up in ranks and strive for more, they no longer qualify for the CFHD benefit, and the raise does not match what they were receiving from the CFHD. I'm talking about a decrease in pay from anywhere from a couple of dollars to $500 a month. The CFHD benefit goes away for people who live in the same area for 7 years or more. Sure, many members get posted, but the Navy folks on ship are only stationed on each coast. Things don't change for those folks after 7 years for cost of living. Well, it does. It gets more expensive, but let's take away an allowance." End quote. Madam Speaker, I want to personally thank this person for being courageous enough to reach out to my office and share their concerns. If politicians never actually talk to our soldiers and sailors and airmen, regardless of their rank, how will we ever know their issues that they are facing, and how can we begin to start working on them and solve the problems? While I am sure the objectives of this government was to increase the draw of new recruits into the forces, they have done this at the expense of keeping the ones we already have. 7,700 troops that currently receive the post-living differential will not qualify for the Canadian Forces housing differential. For them, it's just another benefit axed. And for those members living together who do qualify, a benefit halved, and at a savings of $30 million. I can promise every single person in this House and everyone watching that the long-term effects in terms of talent and investment we will lose as a result of this will far, far exceed that amount. And that's only what we can realistically monetize in training costs. The amount of damage done to morale cannot have a value attached to it. Madam Speaker, it also unfairly targets the Navy. As the new differential expires after 7 years in the same address, and the Navy is notoriously non-transitional in postings, this government needs to commit to communicating with our troops and ensuring that they will not be unfairly nickel and dimed to pay for over-budget programs like the Canadian Coast Guard Arctic and Offshore Patrol Ships, AOPS, which just had their program cost quietly and unceremoniously increased by $500,000, especially at a time when we are in a recruitment and retention crisis. The only solution for the reconstitution crisis is to take the stopgap that exists at the recruitment phase and put it into the retention phase. Madam Speaker, more soldiers in, less soldiers out. The CFHD fails in that objective. What we need is better equipment. We need to start replacing our Victoria-class subs, our Agent Auroras, expand our over-the-horizon radar capabilities, and commit to 2% spending of our GDP to national defense. Our troops need better incentives, better pay, better housing, a fair and timely recruitment process, and a quick and compassionate transitioning process. We also need to remember that the government's solemn responsibility to our soldiers, sailors, and airmen is not nullified as soon as they leave the CAF. And at this point, I would like to thank my two colleagues, the members from Banff Adri Moose Jaw, Lake Centre Lanigan, for their excellent work in advancing veteran issues and being staunch advocates for our former CAF members. Madam Speaker, Canadians, regardless of the job, have been struggling. This budget was an opportunity to provide relief to those that have been dealing with the costs since well before the last election. Instead, we have a government that chooses to run up billions in new debt while simultaneously turning a blind eye to the harsh realities facing everyday families the country over, including those in uniform. The country is facing crises on many levels. This government came out with a pay raise for our force members and almost immediately negated that net increase by completely revamping their housing differential. In the middle of a cost of living crisis, a recruitment crisis, and a retention crisis. And they expect our normally stoic force members to be happy about this newest slap in the face. Struggling Canadians, both in and out of uniform, deserve better than a complacent government content with the status quo. Madam Speaker, when he retired, Jim Flaherty was, as many opinioned, a steady hand at the tiller. During the last economic crisis, the prudent and conservative approach he took showed Canada to be an island of stability in a global sea of uncertainty. It is crucial that the government of the day, regardless of their stripe, ensure that the economic stability and not fall prey to the siren calls of political gamesmanship. It is for these reasons that I will be voting against the budget. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader, Senate.
Madam Speaker, I recognize that the member spoke at great length about